everyone, Dylan here. I'm on a university-mandated quarantine, which means that I can't go outside for 2 weeks. So naturally I found myself going down the rabbit hole of YouTube watching movie scenes when I came across this scene from The Social Network.
Mr. Sapp. Mark! Mark!
He's wired in.
Sorry?
He's wired in.
Is he?
Yes.
And it got me thinking about The Social Network, Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg in general. David Fincher's direction, Aaron Sorkin's screenwriting, a stellar cast, and a pretty good soundtrack are a recipe for some Oscar nominations, but that's not entirely what I'm focusing on today. While there are some creative liberties taken in the film, it is a pretty good depiction of Mark Zuckerberg, Eduardo Saverin, and Sean Parker's development of Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook have been in the news for the last couple years regarding the way it's handled user privacy, as well as just the general role of social media in its consumers' lives. Anyway, I found myself wondering how the young, ambitious Zuckerberg we find in The Social Network would feel about Facebook today. So to start, I think we need to look at how Mark Zuckerberg changes throughout the film and what his vision for Facebook is so we can compare it to Facebook now.
Drop the. Just Facebook. It's cleaner.
Now, I do realize that the Mark Zuckerberg we find in the film isn't exactly like the one in real life, but I don't have very much video footage of him. So it was either Jesse Eisenberg or Andy Samberg.
Well, misrepresenting people is something you have a lot of practice with.
Whoa! Mark Zuckerberg.
Why can't I go in there? I'm the real Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure at least one of those guys is the real Mark Zuckerberg.
No, I am.
From the start of the film, you realize that Mark Zuckerberg is incredibly intelligent, and he realizes it too.
Okay, you are probably going to be a very successful computer person. But you're gonna go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole.
Something interesting I noticed rewatching the film was this line he said to Erica about finals clubs.
Final clubs, not finals clubs. My friend Eduardo made $300,000 betting oil futures one summer, and Eduardo won't come close to getting in. The ability to make money doesn't impress anybody around here.
Later, when Eduardo does get into a final club, it's a pretty big deal. This also clues us in on why Mark wanted Saverin to be a part of Facebook in the first place.
Hey Mark, I need a dedicated Linux box running Apache with a MySQL backend. It's gonna cost a little more money.
How much more?
About 200 more.
Do we need it?
Gotta handle the traffic.
Do it.
I already did.
Eduardo Saverin was very smart, but everyone at Harvard is. Mark Zuckerberg wanted Eduardo Saverin to be a part of Facebook because of his money. There are two depositions depicted in the film. In reality, they happened years apart, but the film does show them happening simultaneously. The Winklevoss twins claim that Mark stole their idea to create Facebook.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No. I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try, but there's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie.
And Eduardo Saverin claims that he was wrongfully forced out of the company that he helped create. Anyway, the depositions are a really neat tool that Aaron Sorkin uses to tell this story in a unique way. It allows the film to show us these characters at their highs and at their lows.
I was your only friend. You had one friend.
Ultimately, I think you could look at this film as a tragedy, with Zuckerberg's tragic flaw being his hubris combined with his notion that in order to succeed, you have to put yourself first. That's how he loses his friends and affronts everyone he meets.
$1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? You? $1 billion.
He tries to be too much like what Sean Parker presents himself as, but Sean Parker isn't as cool or as big of a deal as he presents himself to be.
You're not an asshole, Mark. You're just trying so hard to be.
Zuckerberg is, like so many other young people, trying to figure out what he has to be. Mark feels like in order for people to recognize his intelligence, he has to flaunt it, so in the end, he's left alone, waiting for his friend request to be accepted. Facebook is no doubt his crowning achievement, but I would assume that the Mark Zuckerberg of The Social Network would be relatively unhappy with what Facebook has become. He initially described Facebook as being cool and exclusive, but That's sort of the opposite of what it's become. My parents and grandparents are on Facebook, and I was like 10 the first time I used Facebook. It is now just a pool of misinformation. According to an article from The Independent, Sacha Baron Cohen, the guy who played Borat, is even condemning Facebook for running political ads without fact-checking their content.
All this hate and violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history. The greatest propaganda machine in history. Let's think about it. Facebook, YouTube, and Google, Twitter, and others, they reach billions of people. The algorithms these platforms depend on deliberately amplify the type of content that keeps users engaged. Stories that appeal to our baser instincts and that trigger outrage and fear.
When I scroll through Facebook today, it feels more right-wing, conservative than it does politically neutral, and there's a reason for this. In an interview with Politico, a Facebook executive said that visceral content is simply more engaging. Even though the company claims to be neutral and unbiased, Facebook makes more money off these high interaction posts, which can lead to a mass spread of misinformation.
$1 billion.
Yes, Facebook is very successful. It's got billions of users, but it's not what Mark Zuckerberg originally wanted it to be. It's not the cool, exclusive social network he envisioned. Facebook's decline is because of the same thing that caused those depositions depicted in the movie. Corporate greed and Zuckerberg's hubris.
You want to go back to that? Mark! This is our time!
Ultimately, though, The Social Network is one of my favorite films of all time, and I honestly believe it has the potential to outlast Facebook itself. While The Social Network does tell us a lot about the creation of Facebook and the effects of social media, it's really a story about people experiencing and struggling with the same things the rest of us do. Mark Zuckerberg has no idea where his life and his creation are headed, but then again, who does?